It's that time. Coffee with the Corsie'S, Volume 2. Today we got something special for you. We're going to talk about the last 40 years in real estate. 40 years when Dad got into the business, and the last 20 when I've been in it, and the technology changes with everything with marketing, how we showcased homes, and just the way that Dad sold a house. So, thanks for tuning in. We got some really cool stuff to show you. Dad.
Sounds great. Yeah. We're going to start with probably when I first got my license way back 40 years ago, just over 40 years ago, and the way we used to sort of market things and the technology that we had at that time. So,
which was none.
Yeah, which was very little. I just showed Ty a picture, one of our pictures here of our signs, and of course he says, well, where's your cell phone? And I'm like, well, what do you mean cell phone? We didn't have a cell phone back then, put our phone number on there. All we had was a company, and their number was on there. So most calls all went through the office at that time.
Just to show you guys, pictures were taken on a Polaroid 40 years ago, sent into the board, and the addresses were put on the back of the picture so the board knew what to process. And this was one photo per listing, and this is how it was done back then. So these are all Dad's houses that he sold.
So you'd want to take a couple of photos because usually you would never get the photo back. So you'd have to have a couple of extra photos. So when you're showing people pictures of the home, you'd have a couple of those photos before they actually went inside. So
this is crazy just to look at and think this is how houses were sold. This one's in 1982, so before I was even born. And this house probably at the time was 5 digits, not even to the $100,000 range. So in fact, Dad has his very first house contract that he ever wrote or purchased. So this is his house he bought. From what year was that, Dad?
Yeah, 1977.
1977. We actually showed Peter at our office, our managing broker, and it has one subject. So normally you have inspection, you have clauses about the house.
What for?
This simply states that Mr. and Mrs. D. Corsie will apply for a mortgage from the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. And at the time it was purchased for $59,500 with a $5,000 deposit.
And a 10% mortgage.
And a 10% interest rate. So just to give you guys an idea of just the protection for the people, the clients, there's no protection. On here, their included items were fridge, stove, and curtains. So you're getting a lot of items with the house. This was signed by, of course, the buyer and the seller and the realtors at the time. And the realtor even kicked in his commission of $2,000 to make the deal happen.
He was a buddy of mine.
But this is crazy to see. This is Dad's first house he bought in 1977. And Dad even has the first, so for your realtors out there, data sheets and multiple listing contracts. You know how many pages there are, Dad?
One page again, multiple listing contract. That's all we had back then. What are we up to now? 8, 9 pages or something like that?
Yeah, it's about 8 pages of multiple listing contracts.
Yeah.
And this was 1 page back.
1 page contract signed by the seller. Commission rate, of course, back then, 5.5, 2.5, but hasn't really changed too much. The commission part of it, I don't think.
And even cooler, so back then, Dad's business card when he was with Lakeview Realty, Dad was, of course, you didn't have cell phones back then. There was no such thing as a cell phone. This was even actually before a pager, so everybody's house number, their residence, RES, and their residence number was on their business card with absolutely no there was no area code at the time because we didn't need that. So Dad's house number was on every business card that he gave out.
And I don't even think you had an answering machine back then, so you couldn't really screen your calls like you could today.
You just left it off the hook.
Yeah.
So you look back at some of the stuff and how you market a house 40 years ago, I can't even imagine. I mean, you just sit in open houses is all you was to do. Did you door hangers? Did you pop by houses? Or I see you have a door hanger that you did there.
Yeah, well, that door hanger actually came in a little bit later, and it's a lot like along the lines of what we currently have now. But I think in the early days, really signage really hasn't really changed that much. You know, we had your basic 30 by 24 sign in the front yard. The bigger companies had them on a pole, but most of the other companies had them on just a metal sign in the ground. And that was probably the majority of the way we advertised, in a neighborhood. Sometimes you'd walk around and you wouldn't have things to hang out to people, but you would knock on their door and just tell them you listed the house up the street and stuff. So along the same lines, but now you leave a door hanger there. Before we used to meet people by, belly to belly.
And you knock on a door now, the Ring doorbell sees you and you're toast. So when I got into this 20 years ago, A couple of the things that were very similar were the smaller contracts. So our multiple listing contract, for me, it was 3 pages, I think. It was perforated, you'd tear off the top, you'd press hard, you'd give a carbon copy to your seller. I remember that on my first listing. And we started to use a thing called a fax machine. So that was game changer for me, because every single listing and every single contract, we had to drive to the seller and buyer's house to get every initial. And I remember going to Ladner to list a house, and I forgot an initial. I had to drive all the way back to get one simple initial. That was a lot of work. And just to give you guys an idea, nowadays you can have one agent have the ability to sell 100 houses in a year. Back then, to sell a house a month was actually a really busy year. So 12 houses a year, you would be on the Medallion top list. It got to about 20 would be major at productivity, but now 100 houses you can do because of DocuSign, Authenticsign, and everything like that. So I just remember driving everywhere to get one deal done. And deals were left open for like 1 week. So now you'd have an answer back by 6 o'clock that evening. Back then it would be left for a week to go back and forth driving a car. So crazy stuff. And as well, when I got into it, I decided to take over some of the marketing game. So Dad's marketing went from 0 to 10%. So this is what I did. So I popped into Staples. I got myself this really, really expensive, because this had this blue outer ridge. So this was $3, and I splurged on this one. But this was a binder that I put together for our evaluation package, that we would walk into houses and we would blow people away with the marketing. And Dad thought this was a great idea. So this was printed off on a ribbon color printer, where you would sit there and one page would take 7 minutes. And I would print this off. As you can see, some of our pictures here, which Mom took on our camera at home, and I cropped this out on Microsoft Paint. One raindrop has ruined this front page, but this was the page. And I used to introduce Dad as being, hey, this is this guy, this legend here. He's been in the business for 25 years, because when I got licensed, Dad got presented with a 25-year plaque. So I've been in it for 25 years. I've been in it for 20. And Dad got this when I started being in 25 years. So just to give you an idea how long he's been in it. And he's been the best mentor ever. So what I used to do is show people sales, and I'd crack through the sales of our houses. This would be about 10 a year. I bought a sold stamp, and I would just hammer a piece of paper with a sold, and that would be it. That would be very simple. You're talking ranchers in Surrey for $251,000, which are now worth 1.5 million. So I've seen the market 10 times the value in 20 years. Just looking back at some of these, we double-ended probably over half of our business. Dad, what's that? What's double-ending?
Well, double ending, which doesn't exist really much today. In the old days, basically, when you put a sign on your property, and you would hope that you would get all your buyers through before anybody else got their buyers through, because you wanted to make double a commission, this listing end and the selling end, of course, right? So that went on for quite a few years, what we call double ending in our business, but then agency has changed a lot. Originally, we all worked for the seller. Now, I know people today probably have a hard time understanding that part of it, but even though another company had the listing, all of us other realtors that were working out there still worked for the seller. So even though you were taking your brother around and showing him houses, the idea was we all worked for the seller as like sub-agents. So you're supposed to be working in the best interests of the seller. Well, I think we all knew that if you're showing your brother or sister a house, maybe you were kind of working for them too. So agency changed quite a bit over a period of time to where we are today, which is basically, the buyer and the seller all have their own agents, right? Mm-hmm. It's very, very seldom today do you see double ending happening, because we're trying to get to a point where everybody is represented in the business.
So Dad and I used to work a certain area called Panorama Ridge, and every time a buyer would call us to say, do you have anything for sale, I would write down every single name, email, and phone number of those people, and we got a listing, we would phone all of them before we handed it in to the board. So we would try to get that buyer to buy our listing. So when I look back at all these sales, this was a double end, this was a double. We would simply phoned everybody and said, hey, we got a rancher in Newton, you interested? And they would buy it because they didn't have a realtor. So that's how business was done back then. And just to take you through what we call highlight sheets, Boundary Park in Lakewood Estates, our clients Frank and Barb, we sold this to them 12 years ago or 15 years ago. And in fact, Jeremy, Michael, and Leah just shot pictures and video at this place in Boundary Park. We sold it back then for $3,049, and we sold it now just close to $1 million. And that just happened. So they got to see that, which is really cool. The only source of advertising back then, because you have to remember when I started, it was difficult to get business. There was absolutely no social media. I had no Facebook, I had no Instagram, I had nothing. So we would put ads in the paper and we'd blow people away because we used to put your house in 5 papers. 4 papers, the Now, the Leader, the Real Estate Weekly, the Province, and this is where your ads would go, and we would run ads every single week. I'd throw stars around it, blow banners, balloons, everything. But Dad and I would have the cutoff days where we'd have to get an ad in to these papers to get these ads out. And just looking at some of these ads, these are all condos in Surrey, starting with a 1. Every single one of them was in the $100,000 mark. And it would take months to sell these places. So this is how advertising was done back then. Our Real Estate Weekly paper, which is like the REW guide that you guys see now, the nice fancy book, but it was a thick paper that we used to advertise. So the business has really changed so much in the last 20 years. Your ability to sell more real estate is easier than ever, but having to come from and being taught sort of the groundwork of how it's been, and Dad taught me the really hard work, it's instilled some good work ethic, of course. So
I think as I always said to Ty, which was never think of the money, always think of the job you do for the people. Do a great job for the people, the money will always come.
I think that's an important lesson for everybody to learn. Take away from this, if there's a takeaway, it's always just do a good job for people. I think we still instill that. And the brand, the TCG brand, has really taken the customer service level to the absolute fullest. And the best mentor ever has taught me to keep doing that every single day. So,
well, I think probably you have a lot to do with that, right? You know, you might have taken what I taught you, but at the same time, you've taken it to a different level. And I know when Ty first talked to me about social media, I was like, why are you going to spend your money on
You
that
told
stuff?
me it was garbage. He said, what's this Instagram, hologram, graham cracker? What is this all about? What's this book face? Where are you going to put our ads? And I told him, I said, Dad, you got to do video. People love video. And it has finally taken a turn where people call us in and they only saw us on Facebook. They only saw us on Instagram. And Jeremy says, I saw your sponsored ad 312 times on a listing he shot. So if somebody sees that, you know it's working, right? So we've seen it all together, but we wanted to take this today and just go through some of the stuff, the changes that we've seen. We want to continue the Coffee with the Corsie'S stuff and just bring up stories that we've had together working over the last 20 years together and 40 years as Dad. And we appreciate you guys just following our journey. So, Dad, any parting words?
Oh, I just probably like to say that I've enjoyed my time in this business a lot, and it's actually gotten a lot better since Ty came along, actually. And we have a lot of fun times out there at the photo shoots. I know I was talking to my neighbor the other day, and he was just saying, you know, you going to work today? And I'm going, oh yeah, I'm going to work. And I showed him a video of one of our shoots the other day where we were just laughing, joking, having a good time with the video crew and us guys, and I go, why wouldn't I go to work? This is a lot of fun, and I enjoy it every day. Yeah.
Let's leave it at that. Put your Kleenexes away. We'll see. Stay tuned for episode 3, Coffee with the Corsie'S.